Since we're making Bible jokes today, I've prepared one for the introduction of my talk. When God created the universe, he had no apparent reason to do it, and it was just for the joy of creation, and he knew it would take an immense lot of work to create it and to maintain it. And I understand him. I honestly understand God, in that part at least. Creating is a lot of fun, and maintaining that stuff is a lot of fun. So I want to give you some ideas, tools, structures, architectures for creating some own fun stuff in the OSINT and Recon automation area. I stole that label from Daniel Miesler. I found it pretty good, pretty cool. The presentation is human created, but it has some major AI augmentations in the source code and stuff like that. But yeah, just so you know. About me, I'm Paul. I'm an IT security analyst with Insight Attack Logic. We are based here in Munich. I'm offensive security certified professional. You have my email there, and you can read some of my blogs. I will publish something about this at securitybyaccident.com. Agenda. We want to talk a little bit about why you should use automation. That was already in the introduction, I guess, and where you can use it. It's basic to intermediate talk. So if you're coding a lot of OSINT projects and tools by now, that might be not be the talk for you. I want to help you come up with ideas. So basically the thing that they tried with artificial intelligence in the beginning, I want to give you a lot of knowledge, and I hope this knowledge will interact, but let's see how that works. I want to help you to come up with structures for your own OSINT tools. I want to showcase some tools, libraries, concepts to you. And of course, I mean, it's after ChatGPT, so there has to be some AI. And because this is a security conference, we will have some comics and memes. Let's get right into it. Automation, XKCD summed it up, as always, pretty much in this comic here. In theory, you have initial effort for writing some coding, and then later the automation should take over and you have a lot of free time. You don't have to do anything anymore. And yeah, in reality, most of the time the coding takes longer than you think. It's always like, okay, I'm going to hack this together in 1 hour, and then you take like 5 days, and then there's debugging, and then you have another ideas, and then there's ongoing development because the Docker container isn't running properly and all that stuff. So yeah, keep that in mind. It can have both of those outcomes or something in the middle. So where should you use automation? It's basically in the information technology side, at least, you should treat it like an intern. You should give a task that an intern could do. Getting coffee is hard to automate, sorry, but it should be repeated tasks that you can really reuse the code so that it pays dividends, and it should almost have no moving parts if you want it to be easy to maintain. There are some Instagram and Twitter OSINT automation tools, and Instagram and Twitter and X nowadays, they frequently change their APIs and limits and stuff like that, and these tools break all the time, so just keep that in mind. Basically what you're doing when you're doing OSINT is you're taking a huge volume of data from the big interweb, and you're funneling that data through some processing, and you increase its relevance. So you have some data collection stuff, some data cleaning. You maybe store your data somewhere, then there's some data presentation, and then all of that intelligence goes right into your brain and is really relevant if you've done it right. And a symbolic picture here, you will do it all in your kind of spaghetti-looking code. At least that will be the way in the beginning, and I haven't moved beyond that phase now even. So how? Mainly there are 3 ways to do it. You can use tools. There are a lot of OSINT tools out there, but it's not always the case that they fit your specific use case. You can code stuff yourself if you can code, which I would advise you to learn, which gives you a lot of freedom, but also you have to care for all your maintenance and all that stuff. And you can use automation frameworks. This is kind of the middle between the other two. So you have some kind of framework, but you also have flexibility. You have to do some stuff yourself, but you have some structure for it already. I will be talking about Python a little bit in this presentation, another XKCD comic. It's Python with the programming languages. It's like with the editors. You can use Nano, Emacs, Vim, Add, Cat, or a magnetized needle and a steady hand. I wouldn't advise any of those for coding OSINT automation if you can do it. Even with the magnetized needle, if you can do that, talk to me after the presentation. I would like to see that. Yeah, Python has a lot of libraries, and I want to go quickly through some of them so that you maybe get some ideas where you can use them. In my presentation, there are code blocks. Why did I put them there? I just wanted to show you that they fit on the slides, which I think is pretty nice. A lot of the Python code that you need for basic automation can be done in some couple of lines, and it actually fits on the slides. For OSINT, you will probably encounter APIs at some point. They allow you to stand on the shoulders of giants. So APIs have a lot of data, and there's basically an API for everything you need. Sometimes it's free, sometimes it's freemium, sometimes it's hella expensive. But they are amazing for open source intelligence. And in Python, you have two choices, basically. You can take libraries, like the Shodan library, for example, and do just a quick Shodan lookup for the Apache web server and get some results for Apache web servers on the internet. But you could also do that via the native API call. So if you're just using one or two API endpoints, it might be better to do it with the native API. If you're working a lot with that specific API, you might consider the library. And yeah, you can also, via the requests module of Python, get the HTML of a website, which is pretty cool for building your own kind of APIs. And yeah, looking at some websites programmatically. Regex was mentioned in another presentation today. You can find anything anywhere in text. It's really powerful. It's also really confusing. And I would advise you to use AIs for this. Yeah, here you have a basic regex that is checking for opening and closing brackets and all that stuff. It was what came up when I asked ChatGPT to create a confusing regex, that it illustrates how powerful and confusing it is. Yeah, so you can just see it's really useful for a lot of tasks. Chatbots or Telegram integration, Discord integration, Slack integration, really powerful in Python. You can use it to start things, get notifications, alerts. What I've done here, I don't know if it's secure. I know this is a security conference, but I'm starting a script on my server from a Discord chatbot. It doesn't take any arguments, so I'm feeling kind of safe, but probably some of you would be able to break it. Pretty interesting, pretty powerful. What you can do with this is basically, or what I'm currently working on in this area, is to be able to do bug bounty from your phone. So you have a bunch of Discord bots and you can start them for certain domains and stuff like this. It's pretty interesting, and a lot of stuff you can do with this. Also notifications, alerts. If you have some long running tools in the cloud, you can get back when they are done, and you don't have to sit in front of your computer. You can also use search engines in Python, which is one of the most amazing things. It's like Google Docking, but on steroids. And for example, you can test if a dangerous dog for some domain you're researching or some name you're researching. If you really narrow that dog down, you can check like 100 of them and see if one of them has results and go back to them later. It's pretty easy. Again, there's a library for DuckDuckGo, for example. It doesn't have the strict rate limiting like Google has, and you can search for some stuff in there. Pretty interesting. Really scary, really cool stuff. You can do facial recognition and natural language processing in Python, which is just amazing. When I first started, it blew me away. There are libraries for a lot of use cases here, and they make really advanced use cases possible. For example, this is text blobs. So this is like 4 lines of code, and you can analyze the sentiment of a text, and 1 line of code is the actual text, no 2 lines of code. So it's really cool. You can get the sentiment of a text. You can see if it's positive or negative about something. And with this, you can analyze like tweets, social media posts, articles. Really cool tools you can build with that if you kind of want to see how the mood changes about the topic. If you want to get alerts when there are spikes or variations, really cool stuff you can build here. Flask, it's just for building your own APIs. Again, you see the code here for a simple API. It helps you to make tools available. I have to warn you, security isn't straightforward in Flask. So you have to, if you want to do API keys and so on, you have to look into that. So don't expose any confidential APIs or resource-intensive APIs just to the internet. It's great if you're working in kind of a microservice architecture. Then you can make all of the tools interact. I'm talking about APIs. APIs might be expensive sometimes. But if you don't want to pay for APIs, you can just do web scraping. Here you can use Beautiful Soup for getting content from web pages based on the HTML and CSS tags, and Selenium for automating browsers. And yeah, you can become your own API. There are a lot of blogs about how you can even bypass CAPTCHAs and rate limiting and all that stuff. Yeah, with that stuff, you can really become your own API and basically scrape any web content that is out there, even if they don't offer an API. Just a fair warning, it might violate terms of service. Yeah, storing data. I think we should build an SQL database. Maybe you've heard about SQL if you're here. Yeah, we want to get into some database options. When you're doing open source intelligence gathering, your amount of data you have to deal with can get really big really fast. And then you want to move beyond the storage options of like text files or JSON files. Also, they work a really long time. You might be surprised how long you can use them as data storage. SQL, most obvious option, has run basically the entire internet for almost 3 decades now, or whatever it is. Gets where you need to go. It's well documented. You can play around with ChatGPT and AI on there. It's really cool. MongoDB is like more document oriented, more in JSON style. It's really cool for like large text content if you want to play around with that. And one of my recent favorites, Neo4j, is a graph-based database that really allows you to visualize relationships. The visualization gets messy really quick if you have ever run a big Bloodhound scan, or if you try to, as I tried recently, enumerate all of Tesla's subdomains, technologies and ports opened and status codes, then the visualization is broken, but you can still get relationship queries back. Really interesting for open source intelligence. And there's a database for basically everything. You have time series data with InfluxDB. You have in-memory database with Redis. You have cloud provider DBs like from Amazon and Azure stuff. And yeah, there's just a DB for everything. The cloud, this ominous computer in some guy's basement that is kind of running the entire internet with a lot of caching if you're not trip over the cord. You want to deploy your tools somewhere, and you just don't want to keep them on your personal device running 24/7. So I suggest you maybe get a server or use some of the cloud stuff. Really useful in this in this area is Docker. Is basically kind of a really small virtual machine. Almost all of the available tools have Docker images, which save you some dependency conflicts and all that stuff. And it's really easy to install tools on Docker. So those are the instructions for installing Subfinder, kind of summarized on the right side. And down here is the Docker command to do it. Really powerful. If you build a Docker image for your own tools, it makes them really easy to deploy everywhere. If you're managing Docker in the cloud, I would suggest you use Portainer. It's Docker with a GUI and self-hosted and just beautiful. It's amazing. I host all my tools on like a Portainer instance, and I can just spin up stuff and spin it down. Yesterday in another workshop, I just spun up a Docker container and built a scanner on it, kind of hacked it together in 20 minutes. It's really amazing what you can do with this stuff, because you can also open a shell in those containers. And yeah, it's just amazing. Works on every device because it's in a web browser. Really cool stuff. If you don't want to rent your own server, I suggest you use stuff like Render, which allows you to host websites, APIs, databases for free. It's with GitHub integration. So you just push something to your GitHub repo, and the stuff will be immediately available in the service you're deploying. And it's just, it's not serverless because there are obviously underlying servers, but it's what they call serverless. You can also host databases in the cloud. A lot of database providers have a free tier like MongoDB Atlas, Neo4j. It reduces setup and maintenance, but you obviously have to trust the database provider. That's on you. If you're just crawling open source data, then it might be okay. If you're storing a lot of data, the free tier is used up pretty quickly. Another one I find just really amazing is Grafana. It allows you to build charts and dashboards. You can basically give your application a front end because you can use HTML and JavaScript in there. So you can basically build anything in kind of this dashboard architecture. What you see here is one of the tools I built that just crawls some cybercrime forums and puts down the word frequency, some leaked databases, word frequency over time, and some CVEs they are talking about. If you're interested in that project and want to develop it with me, talk to me afterwards. And it will be probably a future conference talk somewhere. And of course, you have the real cloud like AWS, Azure, and so on. Be careful though, if you leave the wrong EC2 instance on, it might get you into poverty. There are some funny threads at Reddit. There's a cloud service for everything. You can even do satellite-based stations on AWS. It's crazy. You just have to look at cost, and the scaling is to the moon. You can just run everything on there. Just quickly talking about AI. ChatGPT is really cool for coding. Give it kind of small tasks and incremental tasks, iterate on it. It can even do web scraping. If you give it the HTML of a page, it can create a web scraper for you. It can help you with architecture design. If you're concerned about privacy or API costs, there are local models like GPT-4All and so on. You can run them on your device. They're not as good as GPT-4, of course, but they are surprisingly resource efficient. You can run them on almost every end user device that we hackers are possessing. And you can obviously become your own Sam Altman and train your own AI model on your own data. I'm not an expert on it. I've just played around with it, and it's pretty interesting, though. So take a look at this. Since this is a security conference, if you're publishing tools, don't store keys. Don't trust every library you have out there. Don't trust all of ChatGPT's code. And don't forget about unsecured test systems. I can sing songs about how I forgot about this or that server and it was hacked. Tying it all together, the question I'm asking myself right now is, can there be a framework that ties all of the stuff together? We have developed OSINT Compass in a Bellingcat hackathon. So if you want to check that out on GitHub, and if you want to help develop it, it's been like dormant for half a year because nobody's using it. And if you're doing some OSINT tools or Recon tools after this, please send me your work via email, X, Pigeon Carrier, whatever have you. Some ideas for you to get started on building. Pretty interesting if you have like a crawler on Docker, put data into a database in a cloud and then visualize it with a Grafana dashboard. You can do some pretty amazing stuff there. Or the Discord or Telegram chatbot that has some scanning tools on Docker that you're activating via those. Pretty interesting. And I know since this is about OSINT automation and there are great tools out there, just give me a couple of minutes or a couple of seconds to do some speed dating over some tools. There's a list here to look into them. Spiderfoot, one of my favorites, can do a lot of data crawling, is amazing, has Python modules that you can extend. It's open source, crazy. Project Discovery has a lot of bug bounty automation tools for Recon, for scanning. Is really cool. N8N is one of those automation frameworks where you can kind of click your stuff together. You can self-host it. Apache Airflow is another one of the automation frameworks. Baby AGI is pretty cool. It's kind of an AI that iterates on tasks you give it and prioritizes it and has some execution agents. LangChain for chaining together AI modules with stuff. Really interesting. Maltego is graph-based investigation tool. There's a free version. It's not too easy to extend, but it is really powerful for getting started. Netlast.io is kind of a Shodan alternative. It's really cool if you want to look at this. Search OT Rocks lets you look into some breaches and leaks. StartMe has a lot of OSINT resources. There are different pages by different people. You can look at that stuff. TomNomNom, originally more in the bug bounty scene, but he has a lot of like text input conversion, asset finding stuff out there on his GitHub repo. Pretty amazing. Cypher387, she also has the Twitter account Cyber Detective. Has a lot of cool OSINT lists and stuff there. If you want to get into self-hosting, Awesome Self-Hosted has like a long list of thousands of links. And if you're thinking this OSINT shit is pretty interesting, you can either come work for us at Insider Tech Logic. We're doing a lot of OSINT stuff. We're also providing OSINT training and OSINT investigations if you want to see your own attack surface. That's all I got. Sorry for being so speedy. It was a lot of content. The slides will be available later. You can also come talk to me or message me, whatever. Are there any questions?
Interesting topic. Paul, are there any questions?
Yeah, hi. Thank you very much for this super cool presentation. How do you evade actually Google Dork limitations? Because if you dork a lot, so like it stops responding to you
use
by default.
the DuckDuckGo library because it doesn't have the rate limiting.
Like a native API library is.
Yeah, there's a Python library for DuckDuckGo, so you can just use that. If I find it somewhere in here, yeah, here there's a DuckDuckGo_search, and you can use that.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah.
So thank you for your talk. You mentioned quite a lot of libraries, and you're also saying, okay, there's a lot of cool stuff out there. But actually, how do you verify when you're using all these libraries that not someone attacks you? Do you read all the libraries?
No, yeah, it's kind of eyeballing. Yeah, it's one of the dangers, definitely. Even if there's a lot of typo squatting out there, so if you misspell something, no, I don't know it. I might be hacked. Yeah, you're right, absolutely. If you want to deploy it in your company's production environment, of course, then we check if the library is really great.
And what do you do personally when you play around with it that your stuff is not hacked? Do you just run everything in the cloud and not having anything in separate stuff? Because
yeah, no, it's common sense and pray. You are completely right. I don't have any procedures for OPSEC, which might be interesting, but yeah.
Thanks.
Any other questions? With that amount of tools that you're using, I'm assuming the amount of false positives is also huge. So how do you go around that?
Yeah, false positives are a big topic. I had a consideration slide in here. Did that went away? I jumped. Yeah, there should have been a consideration slide in here. Yeah, you also always have to evaluate. For example, if you're building a Discord bot that gives you alerts back, you want to evaluate that you're not getting too much alerts. So yeah, that's a problem you have to look at, and it's always just fine tuning, fiddling around. Maybe if you have some false positives, then you can try and reiterate on that instance, and also then try where you have a true positive if that's still detected. So you kind of have to fiddle with benchmarks, and it's a lot of guesswork and fine tuning. Yeah.
Sorry, another question. When you try to automate these things, for sure you are kind of being too noisy with your IP or the IPs you're using. So from your experience, if you're using IP rotation tools like the ones that AWS provide, does that help? Are you going to be blocked, or does AWS or Azure would be okay with it?
The problem in the bug bounty space, for example, it's like allowed to scan stuff, so that's not the problem. But if you're really doing more open source intelligence, it's always the question: do I want to get blocked from my own IP because I'm causing rate limiting issues, or do I want to get blocked from some proxy suspicious fishy IP? So yeah, that's also an issue. I'm kind of trying to work some kinks out there, but I have nothing ready yet. But yeah, VPN using, if you're testing tools, and then you might consider using an VPN so that you're not spraying your IP address out there.
Okay. Any more questions? All right, doesn't seem to be the case. So, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me.